How are you all? Just give you a sec. My settings just come on. Tried to reset on me. So good to see everyone. Now, as you know, we're on Restream because StreamYard only refreshes on the 2nd of August, which is tomorrow. So the previous one, so Dom was there, done. Whatever that meant. Then Daniel Barber, Uncle Harry. Oh, yes. Good to see you. My new nephew. And then Richard there. Just enough time to finish cooking my pork strips. Yes. I can smell them from here. It's the Tassie Devil smell sense. Very potent, very strong. And Bart K. Yes, but you remember, Bart, we're on Restream, and Restream basically will kick everything off. You can't be visible until the stream starts. So, bon appetit from Bo. Good to see you all here. Just rendered some beef fat and afraid a couple jars of tallow. Sounds good. Now I can get on to the actual stuff that came across. G'day, Loki. And, yes, nothing like a, yes. Making me hungry, Richard, making me hungry. Hello. How's it going, Bo? Yes. It's not a bad day, actually. I've got I haven't pulled the curtains because it usually just brings in so much, light in, and it just starts blinding me, and I'm going, I need to put sunnies on because it's really low. It tends to be even lower in this part of winter. So yeah, but it's quite a nice day. It's not too bad outside at all. So. Are you just dropping in, saying hello, Bart, or do you want to come on, or do you want me to send you a link, or let me know in the chat? Devox, good to see you here. And you, Jaffa, always a pleasure, mate. Oh, do I? Oh, I don't know. Will do. Yep. I sent you another, but I sent you another sort of message in regards to the stuff we were chatting about. You replied. Just sending it through on the same one, mate. Same email that you replied to. So don't have to create a new one. G'day, Deborah. That's already been done. Uncle Bart and Uncle Harry will be here. Winter in August. Makes no sense. You live in an upside down world. Oh well, yeah. Yes. That round ball in the sky. Yeah, yes. Awful to be on the bottom part of the globe. It's not too bad today. Actually, yesterday was a fairly nice day. I actually did a bit of a long walk. I made it even more. He walked well over 20 Ks. I sort of probably all up 12, 13 Ks. I didn't walk that much in comparison. But just out it was a nice day. We stopped at a couple of coffee shops, had a couple of coffees, talked a bit of shit. So I'd caught up with him for a while. So, yep, that's my brother, actually. I should correct myself. But they didn't have the Salamanca market because there weren't any flights, so not enough flights in. So he's a smart fellow. A whole lot of other people turn up at the markets and not a lot of tourists around. Well, yeah, check the flights that are coming into Hobart. So, he did that and realised not as many people, so not worth it. So we just did our own thing, walked around and went and grabbed a sausage from Michael. So he makes German sausages, really nice. And then at the end, when we came through again from the bottom of Sandy Bay, we walked through the markets again. This was at the end of the market. He just handed us a bag from the bottom of Sandy Bay. We walked through the markets again. G'day. I better actually put my plug in. God, bitch. Oh, that doesn't surprise me. Are you visible? What's happening? What's your video?
Yes, well, I'm working on that, Harry. Let me see.
Fair enough. And there's Lukey as well. G'day, Lukey. Yes. Ted's bitch can't get his act, can't get her act together or whatever. His act together. He's going to be in the middle here, so the middle between the two of us. So we can abuse him from both ends, and he'll abuse us. So pretty much, he just handed us a whole bag full of sausages. So he goes, "Here you go, boys," and we just basically walked through the city eating sausages. So eventually, I dropped some off to Ling as well. She hadn't come in, so she was really happy because they're really nice sausages. He makes traditional German sausages, and he's got his own herbs and spices, and also the intestine. So they're really made in a traditional way. So really nice. So let's say I pigged out yesterday. I put my pigtail on and I pigged out on sausage yesterday, and that didn't sound right. Let me rephrase that. Reverse. And he's gone. Oh God, hopeless, absolutely hopeless at that end. Yeah, so it's like snowy Christmas. It's just 45°C outside. Yeah, exactly. Well, in WA it is. It's quite warm. Down here we get about 30, mid-30s or whatever. That's about it where we actually get our temperature. So it's not as severe, but it's a bit different. It's nice. Temperatures down here, even today, it's in the sort of 13 range or whatever. So it's quite moderate. This is winter. Tasmania's not too bad. If you flip Tasmania over, it's basically falls in southern France. It's 40 degrees south. So it's the only difference is that you've got the Mediterranean there that actually buffers a lot of the actual bad weather. Where here we're exposed to the elements of the Southern Ocean. So the Southern Ocean, there's no land mass below here. Well, there sort of is a little island, Macquarie Island, that Tasmania sort of administers legally. But there he is.
Hello.
G'day, mate. How's the holiday been going?
Yeah, it was good. We travelled, oh God, it must have been the best part of, I haven't even worked it out. It had to be several thousand kilometres of road travel that we did over 11 days or so. 2 nights here, 2 nights there, 2 nights every bloody where. Just doing the
So what were from Nelson? What was your direction? Which sort of course did you go? North, south,
east, west? What we had to do, we were doing a circular. The plan was to go southwest of Nelson across to the Lewis Pass, which takes you across the Alps, From there, we were going to our first stop, which was going to be Hamner Springs, which is a hot pools touristy town place in the South Island down there in the Alps. Because of the flooding that happened the week before, we actually lost a day because we couldn't get out of Nelson any direction. All roads out were closed.
Okay.
As it turned out, what we had to do, and it added 2 hours even to that first day, is we had to go northeast instead of southwest, up and around the top of the South Island in a loop, down the east coast, and then back across to get to Hamner, and then we had to backtrack. And so we then did a clockwise loop around. So we went from Hamner Springs to Lake Tekapo, from Lake Tekapo to Moiraki Boulders, Moiraki Boulders to Queenstown, Queenstown to Haast, Haast to Barrytown, Barrytown then back to Nelson via Westport. So a massive chunk of the South Island in a circular, looking at things and stuff. So yes, good. And 2 weeks off and not having to worry about making videos and all of that. But as you may have noticed in the last hour or so, Ted had built up a bit of a head of steam during those 2 weeks and had to express himself, didn't he? Couldn't do a damn thing.
God, you know.
It was unbelievable, wasn't it?
Uncontrollable. Absolutely uncontrollable. I thought you'd put a muzzle on him. No thought of that crossed your mind?
Well, he'd probably enjoy it. He'd probably say, "Muzzle me harder, Daddy."
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
he's a sick bastard. That's true. He's
a sick little boy.
Truly, you know,
yes,
uncontrollable. I actually checked once the some of the maps and the satellite imagery over the southern island as well. So I know the actual road you talk about that loops right through that mountain range. Yep. Some of the areas are really picturesque through there. Absolutely beautiful.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Now with Tasmania, Bo, we're exposed to the southern elements, so we can have temperatures like we have today, which are nice, warm. The sun's out, and it's quite nice, and then it can blow like mad. You can get some really rough weather coming in from the southern oceans, and literally, the whole of Tasmania is just pouring down and windy like hell, and you've got winds that are so high that are tearing rooftops off. So it can go from that to just like today, nice weather, sun out, and you go, what the hell? So because we're exposed, where the Mediterranean is actually enclosed. So even though they're in the same, if you flip the north and southern hemisphere, 40 degrees south or north, you'll end up in the same sort of area. The difference is the mountains around the enclosures of the Mediterranean, all these sort of elements create a completely different climatic environment, because topography is everything, and what's around it and all that can vary quite considerably. So while there are general bans for tropical, subtropical, or whatever, at the same time there are localized effects because of the way the topography is. Tasmania basically had a landmass to the south, not a little Macquarie Island, which is a pissy poor little place. The place would even be warmer, and it'd be a completely different environment. So, unfortunately, it's not the case. When you look at New Zealand, because of the way the air circulates from the tropics to the northern part of New Zealand, and then from the Southern Ocean to the southern part of New Zealand, you've literally got a country that is in massive different climatic zones between the north and south, as Bart would attest.
Yeah. Absolute. I mean, we even, for fuck's sake, had snow one morning. When we're at a place called Lake Tekapo, which is, sure, it's at some elevation. It's not much more than, I think, 1,700 meters maximum. But we woke up the last morning we were there, blanket of snow, for fuck's sake. What's going on here? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. It definitely is weird. New Zealand is a bit like us, 4 seasons in one day sometimes.
That's a Crowded House song, Harry.
Exactly.
Yeah. Crowded House, by the way, a band from New Zealand, not from Australia, as is
Oh,
currently.
hold on. We made them popular. Get over it.
Well, I think what made them popular was the Finn brothers, who were both born in Te Awamutu, just south of Hamilton in New Zealand, and who did most of their musical career there until they went to
That's
Australia. And
that's true as well. I haven't done the video on the Indian one yet, so that's a bit like the flu one. It's even more traditional, but the difference is, as I've said, none have gone through a 5 to 7 year testing period. That's the reality. All the other previous stuff have, so these haven't. So, but these are probably the ones on paper less risky compared to. But as I said, standard approach is vitamin D for respiratory infections. But if you have to travel and stuff like that, these are options. But I would not touch the other stuff because they come from an oncology environment and they cause a lot of issues there beyond clotting factors, autoimmunity, and all sorts of other issues that we've talked about in the past. We won't go over that again. But I don't really know when they're going to be available. Some people are saying that in Australia, for instance, and probably that this will end up in New Zealand as well. It may not be at the last quarter of this year, or which they were talking about Novavax. It may be, depending on, could be early next year or very late this year. And the reason for it is because all these ones are actually being produced in Europe. We're not getting a supply. Our contracts, so the Australian contracts that the government actually has, which are probably related to the same contracts that New Zealand has, because they usually work together, are coming out of European facilities, not out of North American facilities. And that is why a lot of it is being delayed. That's the fundamental reason. Because basically the EU is, let's say, they're controlling the actual the outflows. They're hogging the stuff for themselves, in a sense, you could say. And so, but at the time when the contracts were put in, the governments didn't know that that was going to happen. But Europe is like, the European bureaucracy is a law unto themselves, and they can do whatever they like, basically. And that's what they do. And pretty much nobody else, if they want to trade with them, they pretty much have got no option but to basically, suck eggs, or, it's pretty much as bad as that. So,
Harry, I've seen a thing. Somebody sent it to me this morning, and it's a video featuring a Dr. Karen Kingston, a former
okay.
Pfizer employee and current analyst for the pharmaceutical and medical device industries. She has come forward and said all these technologies that contain the lipid package, the lipid nanoparticle package, to deliver the thing.
They're encapsulated inside. That's right.
Yep. She is saying that every one of those capsules and all of those products, a critical part of the physical construction of that package is graphene oxide.
Well,
Which
look,
is
you can actually,
highly toxic.
yeah, but you still can get graphene oxide from other food sources as well. It does exist in other
Sure.
food sources and stuff like that. It also, basically, when you cook certain things, you'll actually get certain crystallizations of that sort happening in foods as well. So, and it's a very small amount, and the body can actually detox those. I'm less concerned about those sort of things because the small amount of content of different particles or different compounds, or whether they're from plants to create a sort of an inflammatory effect or whatever, they tend to be localized, very small amounts. They're not like a biological thing that can replicate and create large amounts. My biggest concern is the autoimmunity, the sort of effects that can actually happen because these things can get into, they basically are bypassing the immune system. They're getting into basically cells, they're replicating, they're creating a lot of spikes, and they tend to have certain reactivity. Now, the only good thing about that I like about the spikes, one, it's localized with Novavax. On the other thing, they've also got two prolines on the receptor. So that basically, while it can actually still connect to the ACE2 receptor, if it gets in the bloodstream, so if the doctor or nurse doesn't actually inject you properly, it's a small amount. It can't replicate. And also because of the prolines, it can't go into the cell. And it can't attach to any surface of the cell anyway. So basically, it's pretty much a moot point. It just means that if some escape into the bloodstream, you'll get an additional immune reaction in other parts, in other tissues, wherever it ends. That's the only thing. But it's such a small amount. It's not replicating, creating more viral load like the virus does. And that's the other thing I usually say to people, that the viral load that actually you're generating, just because basically you're only replicating the spike and not the entire virus like the virus does, you're still getting a big viral load being put in. And if you've got a low vitamin D, there are still complications. And I think this is where this long COVID syndrome or effect is coming, and where some people may even be getting, moderate type of cytokine storm effects, overreaction of the immune system where it's coming. So it's a complicated picture of a whole lot of multiple factors, but I'm less concerned about the graphene. I've looked into it, and when I look at food sources and all that as percentages within, it's less of a problem. Obviously, there may be some people, and I will say this in terms of susceptibility, in particular because they've got a low detox capacity. There are people that do have, they're very extremely sensitive. And if you're basically putting something like a viral vector or mRNA that's actually adding additional viral load, then you add all these other elements in, maybe that's enough to basically push some people into a danger zone, potentially. There's a speculation, but potentially, that. And we have to be, quite clear. But my biggest concern is that we haven't, we're using new technologies that have got these underlying conditions, and we could be creating an epidemic, an absolute epidemic of long COVID symptoms. And when they could be mitigated quite easily with ivermectin and vitamin D, and they're not being. And this is not the recommendation. And so I think that it's quite irresponsible of governments to basically, or whoever's basically putting some of this stuff out, to basically ignoring these important, there are multiple studies that are coming out on vitamin D, on ivermectin, showing quite clearly that it's reducing the severity. Even when somebody gets the virus, the severity, the after effects are way more reduced, and many of these people recover without any long COVID symptoms. So why aren't we using this method? Because it's cheap. There's no profits in it. We need to basically vax people as much as possible with mRNAs and viral vector stuff, because that's where the profits are, particularly mRNAs. God, have you seen the pricing on that? Have you seen the recent profits that these companies have made? They're handing out bonuses leftover fists. It's just a joke what's happening out there. They brought this dodgy technology from oncology into basically the vaccine field, and now it's starting to get some traction as well, because it's concerning. I don't know what's happening in New Zealand, Bart, but in Australia, the government is actually putting out money, going to provide money to CSL and a number of the other companies here to basically start developing future vaccines using mRNA technology and not traditional approaches. And it's really bloody concerning that's being pushed at the moment.
Yeah, it is concerning. Am I right, Harry, in saying, I've seen people reporting to me that currently in Australia, they have got the Defence Force backing up the police force to mandate that people get poked. Is that what's happening, or is that bullshit?
No, nothing like that. It's basically to keep people from getting out in the streets in certain areas where there are lockdowns. That's what's happening.
Oh.
No, they haven't gone that far yet. No, it's still voluntary to get the jab, but there are some companies that are actually pressuring their employees to basically get the jab, and they're saying that if you want, so they're basically not openly, but they're making it, that we want you to do it. So your employment could be at risk. So there is a bit of that sort of happening, but there is no, obviously they can't do it outright because it's illegal, because there's no law out there actually mandating something like that. Luckily, we've got an upper house, so we've got a Senate, which basically it'll be very hard for them to try and push it through the Senate, because most of the people that basically oppose some of these policies, both the global warming shit and some of these are draconian measures. A lot of them in the upper house are the ones that are most vocal, which is good. Which basically creates a sort of, you don't have that in New Zealand, but we have it here, which creates a sort of a valve or an ability to basically stop this sort of like getting legs and going out of control in that regard. But it is concerning. I mean, the funny thing is that in the rich suburbs, there was hardly any policing where it actually originated in Bondi. And in these Western working class type suburbs, they tend to basically send their troops in there. And it's, I mean, not a good look. Let's put it that way. It's not a damn good look, to control the people from leaving their homes. Luckily we haven't had any real severe lockdowns in Tasmania, but I can tell you that there was a period there last year as we're going through that, I was walking around, there was hardly anybody exactly. And anybody that was out in the street was masked. And when they would see me, they literally crossed the road. They wouldn't even come close to me. And I'm going, God, that's weird.
They've probably seen your show, Harry. That's what it is. They've probably seen your show and gone, oh, fuck, it's him.
Probably. I felt like a leper. Because usually I just walk down the street and, if somebody sort of smiles, I'll say hello, g'day, mate, something like that along those lines. I'm always friendly, but, these people were just basically just across the street. Luckily, there was hardly any bugger all traffic in that period. And it was just really the weirdest sort of situation that I'd ever lived through. And I don't want to go through that again, because things have sort of eased up again, which is nice. People just getting out and enjoying themselves. And there's a few people around that still, muzzling themselves up, but it's a very much a minority. But I don't see it lasting. I see it basically that eventually Tassie will end up a bit like the other states. It's only a matter of time. Somebody gets here with a Delta strain and then it sort of gets legs. It's far more...
How would you know, Harry? Because there's no fucking test for it.
Yeah, that's true. Unless somebody turns up and goes and actually tests and finds out, they got no idea. So who knows? It may already be here. We don't know.
There's no test for the Delta strain. It does not exist. You cannot test for the strain. So how do you know?
I know, but I'm saying that whether it's down here or not, I've got no idea. None of us do. So yeah, look, I'm the same. Yeah, I think it is basically very much like that period where people who were Jews had the little yellow star. Yes, we're going to get the sort of the yellow vaccine, like a vaccine symbol, like a vaccine symbol with a. Oh yes.
Yeah. You talk about yellow star, Ted will think you're talking about him.
Oh God.
Unbelievable. He's uncontrollable. Yes. I can't do a thing with him. I really can't.
Anyway, I tell you, you should have threatened him with that shark.
I should have. I'm going to replace you, Ted, with Bruce the shark. Lucas, you sexy fucker, what have you been up to? Can't hear you, mate. Can you hear him, Harry? I can't hear a thing.
No, we can't hear. Look, Lukey, your mic's he's worked it out.
Oh, how about now?
Now we can hear you.
All right.
What have you been up to?
Yeah. So lately I've just been trying to survive the remaining days of winter over here. And for some reason we've been having like unusual cold, like frost and fridge-like temperatures over here. I'm actually thinking that I should move to northern Brazil because it's really bad. But I've been surviving okay. And yeah, I've just been refining the diet, enjoying peaceful life and everything. And actually, I need to submit a report for my the first half of my internship, and yeah, besides that, everything is going well. I've been very compliant with the diet, and I've been feeling really good.
Awesome. Awesome.
Sounds good.
You're looking
Sounds
well.
good.
Looking well.
Yes,
Mm.
he's out there.
Thanks.
He's maintaining his vitamin D levels and all that. He's pretty
Yep.
much his autoimmunity has gone away. He's
Yes.
meat and sun, and it's all working for
Yes.
him.
The good old SSM protocol.
Meat, salt, and sun.
Good. 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 Good.
Yeah, look, you guys have got a Bill of Rights over there. We don't. So, we've got implied rights, common law rights, but we don't have like a Bill of Rights. And so governments can restrict for, like, in the Constitution, the Australian Constitution, we've actually got for pandemics and stuff like this, where they can actually declare martial law. So they have to go to the Governor General to get the sort of approval. But generally speaking, once that happens, then they can declare in terms of war, pandemics, things like that, major crises of one sort or another. So they can't be open-ended forever, no, but they can be for a certain period of time. But even, if you're forced to basically for a year or whatever, it can be quite intrusive and quite restrictive for a lot of people for that period of time. So it's not a really nice thing that we would be forced. And New Zealand, it's even easier because they don't even have a constitution. So for them, it's, the government, the commissar, let's be correct, the commissar of New Zealand will basically tell Mr. K what he can and cannot do, whether he needs to be locked up, restrained with Ted. Awful, I know, horrifying. But he probably will. I know Ted will love it.
Mm.
I'm not sure about Bart.
Mm.
and potentially even if her royalness, supreme leader, decides she wants to force the jab, she can restrain him and force him. Yes, may get even Ted to do the job, the deed, the dirt.
Yeah. If Jacinda
He'd
wants
love
to
it.
try that, she's welcome to front up to my door and give it a go. Frankly, Ted'll answer the door. Frankly,
Oh fuck!
Ted'll be in the front line. He'll actually take the business. Yeah.
You, Mr. K? Yeah, fuck off.
Yes. Hello, cock and bollocks is what he'll probably say. Can't help himself.
That would be a sight for sore eyes.
Yes, it would. Dear idea.
G'day, Helen. Yes, it's a crazy world we live in. Now, look, they won't. If you take ivermectin is cheap. A lot of this sort of stuff, vitamin D is cheap. There's no profits in it. And remember, these are all off patent, like the ivermectin. They're generics. Anybody can produce them. And there are no profits for the big boys, the big companies, the big pharma. So don't expect them to be pushing this. They will be pushing basically mRNAs, viral vectors, first round, second jab, third jab, another booster, and there's a lot of money to be had. They're going to really milk this, you can be certain,
Yeah.
But a lot of people, because of very poor vitamin D status around the world, they're going to have a lot of long COVID symptoms. And a lot of people are going to be suffering for years. And they're going to be wondering what's causing this, because they won't be able to make the connection. And so, because with a lot of other things that they're suffering, it's like, people are generally degrading because of their diet and many other things and slowly declining. And as a consequence, they'll just see it as part of that. They won't make the connection. Occasionally, some people will, because they'll go to probably a naturopath or do a bit of a more detailed investigation, probably go and do certain specific tests to see certain, where the immune system is and stuff like that, and detect those people. But the general people out there, they'll just go to the GP. The GP will spend 5 minutes with them, and just give them a handful of drugs and tell them to go away and stop complaining. And that's pretty much will be the story for a lot of people. And they'll just suffer in silence for many years. It's an awful situation, but it's no different than all the other sort of stuff that we've seen in the past. So it's no different. It's just, yeah, the world we live in. It's for us, people like Bart, myself, Lukey, and others, to basically get the message out and actually tell people that these governments are uncaring, they are corrupt, they support these vested interests, and they don't give a shit about us. And we need to let people know that they need to eat a species-appropriate diet, get out in the sun, enjoy the sun, not fear the sun, and basically have a lifestyle that has those elements. Earth yourself when you can, try and actually improve your social environment as well, because your psychology, stress, all these sort of things. Stop chasing the Joneses. It's a waste of time, waste of energy. There are better ways of constructively using your time for both yourself and your families. So if you basically live the kibble lifestyle, chasing the Joneses and buying the latest, iPhone, your life is never going to be happy. You're not going to find happiness out of those things. Happiness.
Buy Android for a start. For goodness sake, Harry. Android is the way to go.
Exactly. Fuck, precisely. We're not supposed to be promoting things. I don't get anything for it. But yeah, look. Actually, Androids are pretty good. I've got an Android phone myself. I've never bought an iPhone. Never had the interest. There are greater number of apps on the Android phones, and at the same time, they work. They're pretty good. I don't even now buy. I used to buy the Samsung ones, and I had a period. Probably the only phone from one of the like Japan, and that would be the one of the Japanese phones. And that the only reason is it was a novelty thing. The problem is you can't get the battery out, and but you could actually put it underwater and keep it underwater for half an hour. So but that sort of ran out its usefulness, because it's not as if I was going to be diving in water continuously in the cold environment in Tassie anyway. So it lost its shine, and I don't see. I usually replace mine. I don't know about you, Bart, but I replace mine every probably 2 years. Sometimes I even hold out for 3 years. I don't replace my phone every year.
Okay, I have a Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge, which I purchased in about 2015, I think, and I'm still using that.
Yep. Yeah. My phones are a bit earlier than that. It's only about 2 years old. Well, not even 2 years old, 1.5 years. But I'll probably keep that for another 1.5 years, for 3 years, and then I'll replace it. So it gets a good working over. And at that stage,
Hey.
Not that sort of working over. Get yourself out of the gutter.
Yeah.
You're picking up too many bad habits from Ted.
It's not me. It's him. He's been in my ear. He's been. No, Ted, I'm not saying that. Glad I turned his microphone off for this session. I'm telling you.
Thank the fuck for that.
By the way, gentlemen, here's an interesting anecdote on my side. Last week, I went to a friend's farm, and we actually had raw milk, and it was my first time actually drinking it. But everything was fine, and I even bought like half a gallon and brought it back home. Took me, I think, over the course of 4 days, I drank, about a gallon, like about 4 liters, I think.
I thought you were lactose intolerant.
I'm not. I'm absolutely not. And but nothing happened in these 4 days. But just after it ran out, I started having a lot of bloating, and I was actually thinking I got sick somehow. and I had like
Well,
loose stools for like 3 days, and I was actually getting worried. But then it just went away. I don't know what was up with that, and
well,
uh,
it is raw milk, as you said, and sometimes there's always the fear where you've had and you may have either got a contaminated batch or contaminated yourself without realizing it. So there is
yeah,
that
it's
risk,
possible.
and it's
Hmm.
possibly the reason why, like even my auntie was really careful. Like when we herded goats, this is in the mountains of Western
Hmm.
Greece. She always made sure the tit was cleaned properly, and she would
Yes,
always
yes.
remind me to
Hmm.
clean it properly. And the other thing is they only milked on the day and consumed that milk on that day. Or
Yes,
they sent
yes.
it to the processors. Um, so it wasn't basically, it was always fresh out of the, and it was nice and warm. It actually is
Hmm.
really nice like that.
Yes,
You
I
don't even
had
have
the
to warm it up.
opportunity.
You don't even have to warm it up.
Yes, it's so nice. Yeah, but it was weird. I honestly don't think it was some sickness of a kind, because I had no symptoms besides the
Okay.
intestinal discomfort. I think it's like some kind of, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was some kind of microbiome thing. I'm not
Yeah,
sure,
it could have been. Could have
because
been.
it took me several days to start feeling something, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, look, it's hard unless you test things like that. You've got no idea exactly what could be factors affecting that sort of stuff. I mean, the other thing is we need to remind ourselves when we talk. We have a tendency of thinking gut microbiome, and we think, oh, that gut microbiome is basically all these bacteria. It's not. It's viruses, it's protozoa, it's prions, it's everything under the sun you can think of that is small organisms, because that's really what it is. It comes from the Greek word micro, and bioma, which is things that coexist inside you. So basically, small things that coexist inside you. That's what it comes from. The actual word me, and it basically could be anything like that. Let's not forget that bacteria do get infected by viruses. So viruses could actually be beneficial as well when they're actually suppressing certain pathogenic bacteria. So there's a lot of things that can play. The foods, stress, different things in your environment can actually have an effect on the gut microbiome. It's a dynamic system. It doesn't sit static. It does change and shift and all that. I know that generally out there in the community, we have this sort of bizarre view that we view that things like the gut microbiome, things like muscle energetics or whatever, is this like reductionist static thing that you can actually, no, it's not. It's and even cholesterol, all the lipid systems. It's all a dynamic system. It's constantly in flux and change and all that. And depending on the inputs and the activity levels, what you're doing, and all these things shift. Your mood, everything. They're all in constant shift and movement. And the way things are described in many cases are very, as Bart would agree, very reductionist. And while reductionism has its place in explaining, like explaining lipolysis, how it works, or the enzymatic pathways, or glycolysis, beyond that, it's the interaction, these complex interactions that explain things much deeper, like the Randall cycle. If you just see things in a reductionist way, you'll ignore these complex interaction at the cell level. And that's what a lot of these people miss. You still hear them. A lot of people in the low carb community, in all these different communities, are still arguing about low fat or low carb. But what they're missing, the point is these interactions that are happening at the cell level. And that's why we end up with all this nonsense and these two sides warring like mad. And when they look at the sad dieters in the middle, they don't see Randall cycle. What they see is, oh, you guys are eating processed shit. That's your problem. If you cleaned up your diet, it would solve everything. It's just, and there's this complete disconnect because people are in their own way of viewing things. But that's the problem to a large extent, that we have this sort of very narrow way of viewing things, and we end up going down all these, wonderful little pathways of reductionism in the end, and believing all sorts of things. Yes.
Yes.
So what's happening with your because you've got a trip overseas that you did win for the Sorul.
Yeah.
So are they going to shift it for a later time
Well,
slot for you
I
guys, or?
haven't been told anything at this stage. It's touted to be occurring this December. The plan was that they're flying us all to Hawaii, and we're spending X amount of time there doing a conference and having happy clappers and congratulating each other, etc. It's the annual trip that the company runs every year for people who reach what's called the 50K level in Sorul, which means that's a person who's running 50,000 points worth of business volume a month. So the competition was a recruitment competition, as people may remember, and it got me access to that trip without qualifying at the 50K level, which I've now done anyway. I've actually qualified at the 50K level anyway. So all I would need to do is repeat that business volume 3 more times before December, and I would actually qualify for that trip without that competition at all. Anyway, that's beside the point. The point is that we've not been told anything yet. We're just being told to assume it's going ahead in December, and they'll get back to us. But I really doubt it, Harry. I suspect that it's going to be too difficult to get it together still.
Look, it's a weird environment at the moment.
Exactly, and if they're going to impose any kind of requirement to get poked in order to travel, I won't be going, because I will not be getting poked under any circumstances. So I guess we just have to wait and see. Yeah.
Well, currently they're actually even talking that this year there's not going to be any opening up of the borders in Australia, so New Zealand will follow the same suit, and pretty much it won't be until they're saying, not even in the early part, there may be restrictive overseas, certain types of places only, and in regards to the actual flights out of the country to any destination, it probably won't happen until the middle, maybe even later next year. So pretty much it really seems that, I'm fucking pissed off completely about the whole situation, but that's another thing. But currently the way it is, it's not going to be very easy for anyone to get anywhere in that regard. And I don't think it's going to be, and pretty much Australia and New Zealand are, they are way too restricted. They're way over the top compared to many other countries. Even the Brits have understood, you can't continue this sort of nonsense. The whole purpose of these lockdowns, the whole purpose of all these was to prevent the health system from collapsing. That was the reason why, and that was a recommendation even from the World Health Organization. It wasn't to basically permanently go to zero cases or to basically shut down the whole country for as long as they like, or indefinite nearly. That's just ridiculous what's actually happening. I'm not happy. It's basically a crazy situation. I used to travel a couple of times every year nearly, so, and now I'm finding that, I can't get anywhere. It's even harder to get out of Tasmania to another state without having to come back and then quarantine and stuff like that. And, and you have to have a reason too. So without a reason, you could potentially, your boss would say, well, we're not going to give you any entitled leave. It comes out of your own. You know what I mean? So it's just a general screw up in that regard. And so you could be, let's say, I could fly, let's say Queensland is made available. That means they've got no restrictions. I could fly to Queensland. When I land, restrictions could come in place. And then I'm required, when I go back, even though I went in good faith to Queensland knowing that there were no. I come back, I'm quarantined potentially, especially for, because most of the airports you're flying through, like either Sydney or Melbourne to get to the other states. They are the main hubs within Australia. So as a consequence, if you're flying into any of those destinations, you're forced then, when I get to Tassie, I'll be forced into quarantine for 14 days, whether I like it or not. And if I've come from a hotspot, I'll definitely be quarantined. I'll end up in a hotel where the military actually protect. I've walked past it many times. I'm going, and that wouldn't even be and I'd have to pay on top to be quarantined for 2 weeks. When I flew, there was no issue. It's just bloody crazy. The whole world's sort of gone really weird and crazy, and it's just, yeah. So I don't know when this madness is going to stop, and I think the only time it's going to stop is when people start basically pushing back and saying enough is enough. There's a few protests happening here or there, but until the bulk, the large, I don't see. These are sort of like the old. I can remember looking back in history, like the early anti-Vietnam protest sort of days, where there were small groups of people, but eventually the wider community was sort of disgusted with the sort of behaviour and secrecy and lies of the major of the government at the time. That then you literally got this swelling of large parts of the community, and it's even talking to people at work and others. Some people are frustrated in that regard. And so it's only a matter of time that when you do this for too long, people are just going to say, fuck this. We've had enough. And then the pollies, more out of fear because they could lose votes, they're going to have to sort of wind back this sort of craziness, because that's what it is. It's just way over the top.
Yeah.
As I remind people, you want to keep safe, keep your vitamin D levels up. It's a respiratory infection. That's all you bloody need, And, if you like the two recent people that died, they were around about the 80-year-old. These people are in nursing homes. They're 80-odd years old. They've got comorbidities, and they've definitely got low vitamin D status. And probably the shit and kibble. I mean, it's probably the same in New Zealand that they feed people. It's a low protein kibble crap that they feed in nursing homes. These people will also be sarcopenic, osteoporotic, and have everything else under the sun. They're vulnerable people. That's why the flu usually takes these people out seasonally, normally, and that's all there is. There are younger people that are being taken out, but they tend, if you take a look, they tend to have comorbidities and other issues, and tend to have a low vitamin D status as well. There was a lady, actually, she worked for Centenarians, which is, the Seventh-day Adventist sort of organisation, and she was in her 30s, mid-30s, around there, or approximately there. But if you take a look, they said, oh, this was a young woman, healthy. No, if you saw the photo, she was overweight. So that already told you, this woman's insulin resistant. She's doing the 7-day Adventist diet. She's doing the 7-day Adventist diet. So healthy, God,
Yeah, trans health.
Exactly, and probably slapping on a lot of cream, because 7-day Adventists do not get out in the sun. It's dangerous and all that. When you're eating seed oils, obviously, you'll burn like hell. And this woman would have had a low vitamin D status, insulin resistance, comorbidities. So does it surprise anyone? I mean, Sean Baker's talked about this as well in the US. A lot of the people that because he's in the medical system, a lot of the people that he's noticing that are actually dying are pretty much people that have got low vitamin D status, comorbidities, all these sort of issues related. So it's definitely nothing to do with what the authorities are saying, putting these people up. These are healthy people. And I'm going, no, they're not. And then there are also, just because somebody's thin, they could be a tofu, fat on the inside, thin on the outside, so there are those sort of people as well. So you don't know, because anybody can point to, oh, there was a thin bloke down here that died. Yeah, that could be a tofi.
And what I've been noticing as well is people saying, "Look at this guy. He was an athlete, and he got sick and died as well." But look, athletes, like, they are under a lot of stress usually, and they also follow very bad dietary patterns as well, because there's a lot of there's this common sense knowledge that in the athletes field as well. So it's also bad.
Yeah, but the thing is, like I did with the recent video on leucine, the problem is these people have been deceived to believe that they need carbohydrates and also to shoot up insulin or to shoot up, these anabolics, that will basically give them. All that does is make them basically muscular fat. Insulin is a signaling hormone. It's not basically the thing that drives muscle protein synthesis. As I showed with that study, that basically low protein, the carbohydrate would have increased insulin, wasn't doing anything. When they threw in leucine, it nearly went as high as somebody taking complete protein. Leucine drives muscle protein synthesis. And the last one, which was the ultimate kicker, people that were fasting given leucine had muscle protein synthesis. That's a state where insulin to glucagon is 0.8. That means your insulin is lower than glucagon. So if you require insulin, why were these people basically getting muscle protein synthesis? Because it's leucine that drives it. You need 2.6 or more. And as I've said, if you've got sarcopenia the vegetarian, or basically hates eating enough meat or stuff like that, you basically give them a leucine and taurine supplement. Taurine is an amino transporter, but remember the blood pressure thing, not too much, because it does reduce blood pressure if they're on that when I'm passing out the old fellas. But the thing is, you bring in the taurine as an amino transporter, and then you whack in the leucine, and that basically, it may not basically build them into bodybuilders, but you know what? It'll retard any sarcopenia or bone or muscle loss. So that's a really good way of actually dealing as a biohack. So go and check if nobody's seen that video. But these guys are just taking.
Just listen to Lane Norton. He'll tell you it's all about calories. That's all you need.
That's calories. Cockwomble.
You want to build muscle? Calories is what you need. That's all there is. Never mind anything else. Don't listen to Harry. I've got a PhD.
Oh yeah, exactly. But he doesn't look at. He's selective at what he looks. If you take protein, only protein, and remove the leucine at all, it doesn't happen. And they've actually done that. That was in that video that I've done. So it is leucine that drives muscle protein synthesis. So the old steak and eggs is the way. That's why those bodybuilders with old steak and eggs had big, muscular but lean bodies, and they were still around in their 80s and 90s. Well, the current crop, who are pumping themselves full of anabolic steroids and insulin and all that, are ending up dying in their 30s and 40s and are muscular fat. And they've got a big pot belly with a lot of muscular, and they call that basically the new bodybuilding. I call it the new sick building, sort of grotesque sick building is what it is. It's just appalling what bodybuilding has turned into. A parade of insulin and shooting slobs. And these guys, when they get out of competition, they just fall apart. Their pot belly pops out. They just look really bad. So it's not a healthy lifestyle at all. And most athletes are still into the carb loading. That's why when they get out, and they're no longer depleting glycogen, and they get back into the normal world and all that, they end up, all of them, I've looked at ex-Olympians, fat, getting overweight and unhealthy, and with all sorts of health conditions. So, their lifestyle is crap. But they've been bullshitted, and they pretty much believe it. And as long as they believe it, they'll continue, and they keep on peddling the same shit. It's just, none of these people have got a brain cell amongst them to basically sit down and actually look at all the literature. I mean, I've looked at things like Walter Kempner's, looking at research back from the 1930s on low-fat diets and trying to understand, all these sort of things. I'm willing to investigate these things and understand, and that gives me a better insight into the Randall cycle. I have to thank, Bart, coming across Bart from my low carbon, picking up on the Randall cycle and going, oh, and then looking into it and realizing exactly what really is playing the key role in terms of a lot of modern day diseases. So thanks for that, Bart. You put me on the right track when it came to the real science.
You're welcome.
And the other one on muscle energetics. I learned quite a bit from you about that as well. All this sort of cockwomble ideas that sit out there about how they work.
Yeah.
I also learned a bit from Steve Finney as well, and Jeff Volker about translocation within the muscle of basically your glycogen stores and your fat stores. So, when you become fat adapted, the muscles actually prioritize fat. They actually translocate those where the fat that they're actually holding to use as energy. So it's really interesting, a lot of that sort of stuff. And it's surprising that there is that really good research, Bart's research, Steve and Volker's research, and out there in the rest of the world, 99% of the people are just completely unaware of it. We live in a bizarre world where pseudoscience is the norm, not the, it's crazy. What else you've been talking to a few of your mates in the different areas of research and all that. Is there any sort of stuff that, it's sort of cutting edge that we're not aware of at the moment, Bart?
In what particular area, Harry?
Just in general about different areas, whether it's in sports physiology or whether it's in the nutritional field. Is there any people doing any sort of esoteric studies that are looking at sort of certain pathways that none of us are aware of? Because there's always, I mean, we think that we understand the body, but we really understand very limited stuff. We have a reductionist view of a whole lot of the processes, but we still don't really understand all the full gamut of all the actual pathways, all the enzymatic pathways that are transcripted for a whole lot of different processes. I mean, you can look at one of those and go, wow, now I understand why they use reductionism, because it's just so complicated. But is anybody investigating any area of whether it's, in any part of the physiology, whether it's muscles, brain, or anywhere, that they're looking at some new sort of avenue of things? Have you heard anything on the grapevine?
Yeah, I'm not really aware of anything absolutely earth-shattering that's going on at the moment. I do I do like the comment there about the reductionism and why it's used. Exactly why it is used. Reductionism is a tool that scientists use in order to be able to focus in on anything at all. Obviously, you've got to take things out of their context to be able to get any kind of handle on how they work. However, the problem that most scientists are finding themselves up against is they fail to put the thing back into its context before they then draw conclusions about what it is they've been investigating. So that's where the real problems start to accrue. And then obviously to put something back into its context, too hard to do. So what do? Well, you do epodiddly doodly middly moodlymology. That's a context, they say. Only in that context, rather than being reductionist, in other words, taking something out of its context, controlling all the external degrees of freedom, getting at causality, this causes that, what they then do is throw their hands in the air and say, we're not going to control a damn thing, nothing at all. We're just going to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And then from the shit that stuck to the wall, we are going to interpret a cause and effect relationship. Absolutely, utterly ridiculous. So what we've got in science is two extremes of the bell-shaped curve, if you like. You've got Scientists who are looking at things in a reductionist fashion, which proves nothing except cause and effect of this variable versus that variable out of the context of all the other covariates. And we've got at the other end, we've got everything in context, no control of any covariates. And adjustment, by the way, is not control. It's post hoc adjustment is not control. It should not
Manipulation.
be referred to control. It's manipulation of a data set. It's fabrication of a data set. It's lies is what it is. So what you've got is this end and that end. And from that, we're inferring what's in the middle, and we can understand the shape of what's in the middle. Well, we can't. I'm sorry. That's not possible. So what I would like to see in future is finding some way of getting somewhere nearer the middle so that inquiry can be of more utility, so that we can come up with more useful stuff, so that we don't have clowns running around on the interweb saying plants are good, okay, and meat is bad, okay, because we don't have any evidence to support either one of those claims.
Well, we have the N15. We've got the N15 data. That's still research. It's archaeological research, but it's still valid research.
Yes, it is.
That is the only longitudinal research we have, and that's still valid research. Yeah,
I point to that so often because it is the only piece of valid empirical science, objective science, that we can point to say, look,
and longitudinal.
There are people like Milton Mills running around saying, plants, you're not designed to meat, no meat, plants, Okay. That's a guess. That's a reductionist look. He says, look, we've got teeth, no sharp pointy teeth like this. we don't have, all this nonsense that clowns like Milton Mills say, reductionist nonsense. When you look at the 14-15 isotope testing, the nitrogen testing that's being done, it's not reductionist.
Nope.
Because it tells us unequivocally, without any question whatsoever, what have human beings actually eaten. Not look at our teeth and guess what we were eating, not look at some fossilized shit from 300,000 years ago and say, look, there's lots of fiber in that. Because, of course, the shit that was full of protein would break down more than the shit that had fiber in it. Of course it would, The N14-15 isotope testing takes collagen, a protein, out of the long bones of skeletal remains of human beings of any age, up to and including 350,000 years old, puts it in a spec and says, what are the isotopes of 14 versus 15 nitrogen in this collagen? That tells us what that human being actually did eat. Full stop. Not not guess, no sharp pointy teeth. That's
and the carbon content, the carbon type also signifies what sort of animal it was.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's what it's eating. And that's how we've been able to determine that for the primary, even though humans did consume some coastal fish and some river fish, it was a small amount and it was primarily ruminant animals. That's what the data shows. And even for the ancient Greeks, if you take a look at the one that I actually did on the ancient Greek isotope analysis in the northern part of the Peloponnese, which is the heartland pretty much of Achaean Greece. It's where the Mycenaeans sort of pretty much lived, the ones that went to Troy. So that's a sort of a region we're talking about, and they pretty much, it was ruminant animals with a bit of coastal type fish, small fish. That was about it, which would have been seasonal pretty much. And that was the diet of those people, and pretty much the diet of most populations, because they lived along the coastlines or along river systems. It's the reason, again, why we found certain crops to domesticate along those at some point when we ran out of the other stuff, the good stuff, But the reality is those are the sort of environments. In hinterland only was actually cut down once you actually got civilization, you've got some sort of additional power beyond human power, animal power, horsepower, as we call it, which you can actually bring to play. And that's when you can start cutting down forests and stuff like that and opening up the interior. But if you take a look at pre-civilization, the majority of settlements and the majority of movements of humans were along river systems and along coastal areas. And that's also a sort of environment where they were able to access additional salt if they needed it as well. Very important. That's the sort of stuff we've got, and that is the gold-plated stuff that I rely on. That's what convinced me in the end, and should convince you as well, because everything else is, 2-week study or 3-week study or even a year study tells us absolutely zilch, nothing.
Yep. And
all it says is,
go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, all it says is basically for that period of time. The ultimate study I think would be, we want a generational study. So how do you do that? Well, you can't lock people in.
No.
Because that would be unethical. But how about, I've always said, is there's a lot of lifers around in jail. Why don't we actually recruit a whole lot of lifers across the planet that basically are in there, put it in special facilities where they're given better amenities, a lot of other things to basically, make them volunteer, get them to volunteer. And they are our guinea pigs on all sorts of diets. They're there for life. And you could basically, do studies, longitudinal studies, and really see what happens. I can tell you the ones that are eating all the meat stuff will be the calm ones, and the ones that are eating the plants will be the completely anxious, out of control nutcases that are trying to get out of the cells. So, but it will be a really interesting experiment that can be done over 20 or 30 years. What do you think, Bart?
Yep, sure. I mean, that would be, if we could get that data together, that would be better than the data that we've currently got, perhaps.
Exactly.
Because it will be controlled lock-in, literally. There would be ethical issues. Obviously, they would have to volunteer. They would have to say, I want, and as you say, if you sweeten the deal for them, they may well. But then there's an ethical issue, often with ethics committees. If you say, we're sweetening your deal to get you to volunteer, then whoops, are you coercing them? In the same way that the governments are saying, look, if you just get poked, we'll give you back your freedoms, which you're fucking entitled to anyway, by the way.
Hey, they're offering money down here. Do you know that?
Yeah, well, no, exactly. Crazy.
Crazy. You can be in a competition and win a small lottery type thing.
Right. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, that's fucking crazy.
If you want to do a quick study to deal with idiots like Milton Mills, when he said we can't be carnivores because we don't have sharp pointy teeth like this, here's what you do. Okay, you get a plate with some meat on it, and you pick up a knife and a fork, and you do this.
Exactly.
End of fucking discussion, Milton Mills. Okay. Why haven't we evolved away from having teeth the shape we've got, a jaw the way it is? Why haven't we lost that vestige of our plant-eating past some 5 million years ago? Because there's no negative selection pressure that says we need to have sharp, pointy teeth. People have never dived at woolly mammoths headlong with their mouths open. We used sharp, pointy sticks. We have thumbs. We can fashion a stick. We have brains. We can think about this stuff. Okay.
Even stone tools.
Exactly.
Even stone tools to cut things, and the stone tools don't go. They go way back. But that stone tools existed before. We're talking about even before Homo erectus. Stone tools existed, so they've been amongst the hominin or the genus Homo. They've been used for a very long time, millions of years. So for somebody to say that we are not adapted to meat when we've been using stone tools to cut meat for millions and millions of years is complete and utter bonkers. And to claim that eating plants, which we've only been doing in a large amounts since tillage 5,500 years ago, that is our true diet, you've got to have, a few screws loose upstairs, as far as I'm concerned, to actually even think in those terms. But that's the sort of propaganda that these people are putting out. And when you've got the media and all that that lap all this up, you just have to look at all these characters. Have you seen the recent one that actually Sean Baker did about the prince, and basically say, oh, the kid would play with a little animal and basically eat the apple. And what did the kid do? Grab the actual and try to eat the rat.
Awesome. I did see the one where he had a kid that was the I presume father, I don't know, an adult male with a young child, and the adult male was trying to encourage the child to drink some plant-based so-called milk, and the kid's going, "No, it's horrible. I don't like it. No, it's horrible. No." Kids know.
Yes, it's instinctive, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the common questions
the sugar part that he actually mentioned, he should have mentioned that basically we are naturally, because we do consume seasonal, we're designed to basically fatten up for the winter. So that's a built-in design. The problem is we've got it 24/7 now. That's the only thing that he sort of explained a bit better on the actual sugar part and the Randall cycle. Which you and me do about that, and the seasonality. Now we've got it all year round, but we've still got that built-in thing to seek out sugar with fat to basically fatten up, to have enough fat stores for the winter periods. That's why we've got higher fat stores than other apes around the place. We're designed to have that as a reserve energy, as our primary energy for most of the time of the year. Yeah. Before refrigeration and before supermarkets existed. Yes. Just on this one, I'm going to be doing a Devox. I'm going to be doing a bit of a video on these sort of stuff, the taurine, the MKs, the MSMs and stuff like that, and sulfonation, and cover a bit on oxalates and how they deplete a lot of this sort of stuff. So I will cover that. Yeah, and also with cancer, there is a tendency of higher oxalates, another reason to avoid the damn plants.
Sure.
I'm just floating through these now to try and see if I can spot something that really will get us going.
Gentlemen, I think I need to get going. I want to get my sleep proper.
We'll see.
All right.
Loki, thanks for being here.
You're welcome, Harry. And it's nice to be here once again, and nice to have Bart on the show as well.
Thanks, mate. Good to see you as well.
Stay well, you both. And yeah, if I'm not awake for tomorrow, I'll see you both next week.
Not a problem. Take care. See ya.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. There you go.
Yes, pretty much. Where's Ted hiding? Still down there?
Oh, yes. There he is.
What sort of nefarious things is he doing down there?
He's been feeding me ideas. He's been in my ear. He's been saying things you wouldn't believe, frankly, Harry.
I can believe anything. When it comes to Ted, anything is possible.
Yeah. Ted, you've been misbehaving down there, haven't you?
Bollocks! I missed a couple of these images. Hold on, let me just... There's a couple of attachments here from Lukey. And this one is from Richard.
So AG and I have been having a bit of a text discussion in the background about various aspects of exercise physiology for those that are not really following what's going on in the background there.
Okay.
Yeah, the answer I gave AG to that question was that gluconeogenesis is demand driven and not supply driven. And
Exactly.
as such, you will never make too much, and so therefore it won't be a cause of inflammation.
As I mentioned to these guys in the past, when you've got insulin to glucagon 1.3, you can actually punch in as much protein as you like. Remember the rat, up to 70%. As long as you don't have sugar there, the insulin to glucagon isn't going to go change in any direction, and the amount of sugar that's being produced is going to remain exactly the same. It's going to be flatline. There's shitloads of research showing that. Protein does not increase blood sugar, period. It's demand driven, and it depends on also activities and stuff like that. So we need to squash that properly.
Yes. Ted thinks it's
bollocks
too.
I agree, Ted. I agree with Ted. Don't shoot me. I'm a massive idiot. Prove it. Carbs are the body's preferred energy source.
Derp, 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 derp.
Is that Salad Boy's new style?
Yeah. Looks like it.
Yeah, it definitely does. Oops, that was just a link to the Discord. So,
Who, what, when? Discord. Goodness.
yes, your Discord.
Yes.
I think Fapnado's put it up,
Very good.
or one of them.
Very good. Yep.
I'll have to make an impromptu turn up one of these days and just scare the living pants out of them.
Yeah, they will. They'll go, what? What's going on here?
Exactly. Shock to it'll be a shock to their system. About trials? What trials? Yes, anything.
People in prison being
yes.
asked
That one. Yes. Oh, look, I think that they could actually. It would be. They would get something out of it, but so would the whole of society in the long run. Because there's no other way you can actually compel people to be locked in, and you know all these sort of things. Take this book and follow this diet, and we'll check with you in a year's time. That's not going to cut it. You've got to basically control the food that's actually being provided to these people, because the reality is people cheat. I mean, we cheat. Humans never comply 100% to anything. The difference is, what me and Bart say is, I've got my ice cream addiction now that sort of have eased off recently. Occasionally
ice cream.
Well, Ling's been making me some low carb stuff, like some carnivore stuff, which basically has kept me away from the nasty stuff.
Yeah.
So which has been pretty nice, but otherwise, I hit the other stuff, even though it's supposedly low sugar, which is bullshit. It's ice cream with just slightly reduced amount. But that one and the other one is alcohol. If I go out sometimes with my mates and all that, I can really get on the booze. And so we are not living ancestral diets. But that doesn't mean that it's not valid to say that an ancestral diet works and give the reasons why and all that. That doesn't invalidate the science, just because we can't comply 100% with a lot of that sort of stuff now and then, because we're human. We're imperfect creatures, and we very easily succumb to addictions and certain types of behavior in different type of social settings, and that's the reality. But as long as we keep it, to a certain minimum, we're not going to basically end up with major problems long term. But we need to be completely candid about that. And we are. Me and Bart are. We don't hide this sort of stuff. I know a lot of others do, because they're selling product. I'm selling you this supplement, or I'm selling you this. They have to basically put up, maintain certain appearances. We don't give a shit about that. We're basically for the purity of the science, and to make sure that if people make claims, they need to be able to back them up. And that's, a lot of people come to me and say, oh, what about this and all that? And I go, well, if you've got a study that's it's a high quality that actually shows causality, sold to me. And whenever I do that, it is really funny that I never get a reply back. Isn't it so strange? They make a claim, I make a response, and then there is deafening silence at the other end. And it just tells you that basically people have just heard something somewhere and they're just repeating it with no proof whatsoever, nothing to back anything up. It's just the same sort of stuff. It's like today's one that I did on basically the prions, and they're basically an alpha helix type. It's not the beta helix but this is what people do. It's emotive. Oh, the spike has a a prion. Oh, it's going to kill everyone. It's going to turn us all into, retards in a couple of years. No, it's not. But the thing is, it's emotive. It sells books. It sells. It gets clicks and all that. And that's the problem. There's a lot of garbage out there, guys, to scare the living daylights out of you. If there was, I can tell you one thing. If there was, I'd go bush and lock myself up. Until it died through the population, burnt through the population if it was that bad. But the reality is it ain't, and it couldn't be, because even the ACE2 receptor is designed to basically have the sort of structure to deal with only alpha helix types. So why would a virus basically create a different type of adaptation other than the one that it actually suits to be able to get into the cell much easier, more efficiently? So it will stick to those, and the body knows best. It's been around dealing with viruses and bacteria and all sorts of things for millions and millions of years. It would not, otherwise we wouldn't be here if it was so stupid. But these people think that we're stupid and we're going to pick up on this, and it's emotive. It's emotive to scare and put the fear in us. You don't have to fear the virus, guys. You don't have to fear the flu, any respiratory infection. All you need to do is maintain good nutrition, which is animal foods, and keep in the sun, maintain good vitamin D status. That's the critical part. You do that for most of the time with less indiscretions or cheats, you basically will survive not only this, but the next one and the next one after that. It's the people that are constantly in the trough, in the kibble trough, and avoiding the sun, doing all those things that are, that are not species appropriate. They are the ones that basically are going to be falling left, right, and center. And if we stick to our guns, we'll be examples to others. I mean, my mirror, she's an example to others. She took the vitamin D, got her levels up, bang, not a problem. While other people in her community were dying left, right, and center. And, they started picking up on some of this stuff because she's on social media, about ivermectin, vitamin D and all that. And it's getting around. And some people are starting now to go, fuck the medicines, fuck the vax. We're going to go for the stuff that actually really works, the vitamin D and the ivermectin. Ivermectin sales, like in Indonesia at the moment, have gone through the absolute roof. People are struggling to find ivermectin. Because they're literally pharmacies just being literally emptied at the moment. So some of these messages are getting out, which is good. People are taking charge of their lives, taking charge and taking control, and resting it in their hands away from the big pharma boys that are basically just want to make money off their misery. Another one of your comments, mate.
Yes.
There definitely isn't.
There's also clearly no such thing as correct spelling. Sorry about that.
That's true. I didn't want to make that comment. I just cruised by that.
Anyway, I had better also do a runner on you, Harry. I've actually got a series of videos for the week that need editing. I did an afternoon of recording a week's worth of videos yesterday, and I need to do all the editing and stuff because unbelievably, while I was away on holiday, people did not stop being wrong on the interwebs.
I bet not.
There's been a bit of it going on, so I
It'll
can
be
tell you.
our favourite crowd again.
Well, most of them concern the hypocrites. I can tell you, I'm doing Zelda from the Terrorhawks, otherwise known as Pam Popper. We'll call her Zelda from the Terrorhawks, because the resemblance is remarkable. So if people don't know what I'm talking about, go and do a Google search on Zelda from the Terrorhawks and do a Google search on Pam Popper and put the two photos side by side. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Well, that bad.
Yeah, well, I'll be doing that. Who else have I got that I've been dealing with? Oh, yes, Joel Furman has had another crack.
Not him.
Yeah. So anyway, I better go and do all of that. And
Yeah, you better. We need to be entertained through the week.
Well, this is it, exactly. So, yep, I'll go and do that, and I'll look forward to your company at the various premiere presentations throughout the week. Don't forget to subscribe to all my fine channels. There's 3 or 4 of them now. If you're not subscribed to all of them, what's wrong with you? They're great, every one of them.
They're in my feature stuff as well. So go there, because basically I've put, go and click on them, please, if you haven't.
Yes, indeed. They're
we
really
need to support each other.
We do. And yes, let's also get Harry up to that magical 1,000 subscribers mark.
It's nearly there. I'm shocked that I got this far.
It's one of those things. It takes time to get some momentum going, but once you crack through 1,000, suddenly you'll find 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10,000 happens pretty easily. And then once you get to 10,000, what happens then is YouTube starts actually paying attention to what you're doing. You'll be marked as a bad boy, and then you'll be stopped from progressing for the next 10 years. But anyway, that's all for you.
So I've got a spanking to look forward to.
Oh yes. And Ted will be there, and he'll be administering the business. Harry, he will.
You'll be using one of those really fine whips, not the thin, the ones that really tear into the tissue.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, my man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here,
everybody. Not at all. Enjoy the show, everybody. Don't do anything I would, and we'll see you during the week, and possibly that very little yellow bastard might show up again too. You never know.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for being here. Right. Thanks, Ted.
Bye. See you then. Bye.
Bollocks.
See you, mate.
I can't do a thing with him. I really can't.
Oh, there he goes. G'day, Scott. I just realised how far behind I am. Nah, need to. Yeah, in the future, I'll get you on, because I'd like to do a bit on the hunting stuff and a few things like that you get into. So we'll have a chat at a later point. And I've already... Oh, that was a Discord one. So, yep. Yes, sulfur-rich foods, very good for your hair. Definitely. The keratin, very important, very important. But oxalate will deplete it. So people who have still got pre-existing oxalate issues that they're dealing with, MSM can help with that. Yeah, we did quite a bit of scavenging. That's true. That's why our pH is 1.5 on average. Sometimes it's a bit lower. But if you've never seen that video that I did on the Savannah chimps, go and take a look at it. It's the one that I did with Bart. There's a link in the playlists, and it really is interesting about the actual the chimps, how their gene, the sort of the gene expression of being more cooperative and stuff like that. How a lot of these, because of the circumstance, the environment they found themselves in, changed. Some of the hunting techniques, which would have been very similar to early hominins. So really interesting how quickly they shifted. They have tried to adapt to this new way of functioning. So let me just find it for a sec. Give me a little short sec. And I'll put it in the actual, so anybody that wants to go away and actually check it out. Let me go to my playlists. Yep, it's this one here. Yep. And this is on the Savannah chimps that I did a while back with Bart. It was on his channel. So that one there is a bit of an insight in how they are adapting in the savanna environment. And you can see a lot of similarities, which would have been of early hominins. So, and also, I've done an earlier video that covered how that was on Bart's as well, which covers on chimps eating up to a ton of meat a year. So, all this bullshit that vegans peddle out there is just bullshit. It's pretty much nonsense, always has been. Our closest relatives, the only difference is that they used to consume much more leaner meats because they've got very limited fat storage. That's the only difference. But beyond that, Yep, exactly. Yeah, and that's true. They had perfect teeth, eating ancestral. And then once the refined sugars, the flours came in, and that came with the missionaries. As the missionaries came in and created missionary schools and took the young children, they started introducing the oils and refined sugars. And we see that now also in schools in the sort of Kenya, in the tribal areas. Remember, that was covered by Mary Ruddock in one of my interviews with her, and she sort of covered about how they had basically started introducing a lot of this sort of stuff, and how they've got actually a program to basically get donations to be able to buy animals for the kids at school so they can provide them with raw milk so they don't have to eat that garbage. But that's exactly what happened, in those early days in Australia, but also now is starting to happen in many tribal areas in Africa where these seed oils and refined sugars are being introduced to the children at such an early age. And these kids now are quite vulnerable compared to other children that are still living in a tribal situation. They are more vulnerable to disease and have a more disturbed gut microbiome, which makes them more vulnerable to pathogens in the environment than what they were before. And they actually talk about a lot of that. So, what we've done to ourselves in the last couple of thousand years and to these indigenous populations in the last couple of hundred years has been quite atrocious. And these indigenous populations have actually been even worse because back then we gradually moved into carbs. 5,500 years ago, we had tillage, so we were able to push up the amount of carbohydrate intake. But still, there were plenty of animal foods and many other things, and that slowed. And it wasn't as refined as it is today. And we didn't have any seed oils. And that gradually increased, and there was some level of adaptation, not perfect. Some populations, like the Chinese and Japanese, have got a bit more adaptation in comparison. but that's because of certain circumstances where they had limited animal foods for a very long period of time, and the body had to adapt slightly in terms of choline synthesis and metabolism, and a lot of the other process of methylation slightly shifted. But that's only those two populations. The rest of the world is still, has not had that level of adaptation, but has some minor adaptation to lactose and some minor adaptation to, there's actually more adaptation to milk around the world than there is to carbohydrates, because a lot of the actual populations, when you look at Central Asia, the Eurasian continent and all that sort of area, a lot of those populations were the main populations even today. The Middle East sort of area and that sort of area beyond India, so a large proportion of the world's population still has more ancestral rather than adaptation to plants to the same degree. But those populations that do tend to do a bit better and can tolerate. But these populations that are tribal, that have only had, let's say, exposure the last 50 years or 100 years to carbohydrates, they really struggle and suffer. And the other thing is, some of them also may tend to have also what I have, which is a glucose 6-phosphate deficiency. So I have that as well. I don't have the worst. I've got heterozygous. I don't have homozygous. So I don't have the worst type, but I still have some effect in that area, which basically means, if you know anything about glycolysis, the first stage after glucose is glucose 6-phosphate before you go to fructose 6-phosphate. That enzymatic pathway is weak in me. It's not really weak, but it's weak. And some of these tribal populations is quite weak, which means that they just don't have the ability to work with carbohydrates. And when you use a lot of carbohydrates, you end up depleting too much NADPH, which really just fucks up your energy production. The thing that fixes these things, I've never talked about them, but I've talked about them in sort of passing, is riboflavin. Riboflavin is the thing, because I've talked about that other methylation pathway, tends to improve the glucose 6-phosphate deficiency situation, not only the methylation part of that other, but choline is the other one that's really important. So if you've got these genetics like I have, you've probably heard me, Bart's talked about it, about me as well, that how I try to consume quite a bit of choline, whether it's from liver, eggs, sometimes even supplementation. I try and get quite a bit more than the average person. And the reason for that is because I need to basically get my methylation through choline, because I've got a deficiency in terms of NADPH due to the glucose 6-phosphate deficiency, plus the methylation side. So I've got, quite a bit there. And so I need to, in order to bring down my homocysteine, I need to consume more choline-rich foods or even supplement to basically get the choline levels high, so I'm not actually overtaxing these other systems, because, that means you take away that energy from those systems, or they take it up, then you lose energy in other repair systems and all that. So that's not a good thing for my longevity. So I need to basically eat be a bit more strict than other people on eating ancestrally to basically support those pathways. And different people will have, but it's quite, the amount of people that do have is quite pronounced. I just haven't done the video yet, but I will do it at some stage, and you'll be quite surprised from different regions of the world how many people do have these conditions, and you'll go, ugh. If you do have this condition and you know about it, do not listen to the naturopaths. The naturopaths will make you B12 deficient. They recommend things like folate. What they don't really understand is when you give thousands of IUs of folate, you will end up basically, or milligrams of folate, you'll end up basically making yourself B12 deficient. You need riboflavin to restore that. And you also may need choline to basically, so you're not overtaxing your basically energy system when it comes to methylation. So those are the key things. But a lot of people in the naturopathic world seem to have this reductionist approach, and they make things worse. How many people I've come across that have ended up with pernicious anemia by doing the folate thing. You can take thousands and thousands, it doesn't make a difference. Absolutely doesn't make. The only thing that fixes up that enzymatic pathway is riboflavin. I've shown the study, I've done the thing. You can find it on my, and it also, because it's supporting that pathway, the methylation pathway, it's putting less pressure on the NADPH side, which means that if you add a bit of taurine as well in there, you're going to take even more the pedal off that, which means you're going to provide more support, especially if you've got as well, not only the methylation side, but as well a glucose 6-phosphate issue. And you're one of those lucky people like me. You got plenty of issues to deal with in that regard. Species-appropriate diet becomes even more important for people like us with those sort of characteristics. Does someone baseline blood sugar levels continuously raise as they become more insulin resistant? Thank you. Yes, because it is due to the Randall cycle. But how much is going to be in the system depends on their activity levels, their muscle glycogen stores, their liver glycogen stores, all these factors, because these are dynamic systems always moving. If you're talking about somebody just sitting around and being completely and utterly sedentary, yes, it will continue rising. But if you're basically somebody with activities and stuff like that, it will be variable. But it's not a good thing. And it depends on what you're putting in the mouth as well. So if you're inputting more and more, yes. Quickest way to actually deactivate this is to drop the insulin. And the quickest way to do that is fasting. Do a 3-day fast and you'll clear out your glycogen. You will basically become insulin sensitive and you will drop the insulin to glucagon to much lower levels. Now, there can be, if it's chronically elevated for a very long time, it can take some time for the deactivation of the sort of Randall cycle. It takes about 3 days, but also the coming down of insulin. So insulin may still be slightly not as elevated as before, but still slightly high. And you have to be quite strict, for a couple of months sometimes to basically bring it down to more normal physiological levels. So that's another issue in itself as well. So it varies between people in that regard. But there's the majority of people out there are very highly insulin resistant, and it usually takes some time. Even when you fast, I mean, Jason Fung has done many studies where he's shown that even when people are fasted, they can still be insulin resistant for some time because they are they've downregulated, they've engaged the Randall cycle for so long, they've downregulated a whole lot of enzymes. So it takes some time for the body to shift again. And so it can sometimes take a couple of months, depending on the person, depending on where they are, depending on the nutrients, what they're eating. It's a lot of factors at play, depending on their muscle size. If they've got very little muscles, it's very hard to become insulin sensitive because muscles improve metabolic rate and also provide storage for blood sugar, basically, so for glycogen. So there's a whole lot of factors at play in that regard, but it takes time and it will vary between people. And there's also going to be some genetic differences that also will mean that it'll vary. So it's not one suit fits all. But one thing that you can be determined, if you stick to a species appropriate diet long enough, your body will normalize over time, will come back to a level of baseline, a normal baseline, which is an ancestral baseline. It just may take longer for some people, and some people may need to supplement a bit. They may have fatty liver. They may have a number of these genetics, which means you're gonna need to take a bit more choline to export the fat. You're gonna need to take a bit more taurine or this or that, or to basically make the different adjustments, the healing, to accelerate, to improve the liver function. Your liver function may be in the toilet. So basically it means you've got a lot of fibrotic liver. Well, then you need alpha-lipoic acid, which is a massive, and you need to flood your body with alpha-lipoic acid in terms to have a main electron donor to go there and stabilize all that reactive tissue that's lost a lot of its electrons and it's in a mess. You also need to break down that fibrotic tissue. You need taurine. But again, if you're on blood pressure meds, you need to slowly adjust that, as I've said before. So there's a lot of things, and it can take time. Different people will take longer. But you need to make the adjustments, need to make the move. And you need to be disciplined about it as well. Like last week, I usually fast until midday. That's what I do. And so there was a birthday. So yes, I did cheat. I did have a bit of cake. But on that Thursday that I did that, what did I do? I pretty much fasted. And people said, look, I put it on my plate and I said, I'll take it back to my desk. And I didn't eat it until it was about 12-ish. Actually ended up being 12:20 something before I had it. So then I felt a bit guilty, but anyway, I still had it. It was nice. Hadn't had, as I said, when it comes to that sort of stuff, I do a bit of that now and then and thank the person who was around there. There were two people actually that had a birthday, so they brought a few things, but I limited it to only a few things, and that was about it. But you still have to be sociable, the way I see it. Well, that's how I excuse it to myself. We all lie a bit to ourselves, and so do I. I'm no different. But if you basically have a problem, you need to really go hard and really clean. I mean, when I was reversing all my cardiovascular issues and all that, I really went hard. I really had to cut a lot of people or things out of my life deliberately because I needed to save myself. Now that I've basically cleared all that up, I have a few more indiscretions. Probably not the right thing to do. It's not the, I don't give a shit about what people say. That's, I don't follow dictates of other people. As I said earlier, we all cheat. I stick to the science, and if it's valid, it's valid. If the research, the N15 data is valid, it's valid. It's empirically proven. But at the same time, we're still flawed human beings living in a flawed environment, and susceptible to things like that. Just try to keep them to a minimum, because if you're sick, you really have to be very disciplined. From my own experience, I had to give up a lot of things which I didn't like at the time, especially cutting out alcohol, all these sort of things, never going back to tobacco or anything like that, doing a lot of those sort of things. I still don't smoke. Occasionally, I do puff on a cigar, and it's usually around Christmas time. That's, one indiscretion a year. But generally speaking, and they're good Cuban cigars, not the shit stuff. Got to get quality if you're going to do that. And there's also, those sort of things that you do. But generally speaking, if you really want to reverse things, AG, you really got to go hard on these sort of things. It's just, there's no other option when it comes to that sort of stuff, especially if you've got severe insulin resistant state, whether it's you or a relative of yours or whoever. So in that regard. Yeah, I did put it up for a sec. I did, and people can go to it. Yes, they can. So where is it? I thought that was Bart's. It's yours, is it? I will basically pin it at the top, mate. Pin it to the top. So there you go. People can see it there where it is. On living through disease on carnivore, early settlers in North America noted Price found the Indians and plenty of their looked like centenarians and took note of the coastal ones that ate plants. Yeah, exactly. Look, even Mary found shitloads of centenarians in these tribal societies in Africa. But remember, the average life expectancy has nothing to do with people living longer. It's the average. It's basically, if you're living in a society where it's war, you go and look at a society like Syria. The average life expectancy there has dropped dramatically. Why? Because a lot of people are dying in their young age. And so the average life expectancy comes down because there's warfare. When there's not warfare there, then the average life expectancy changes. So it all has to do with, pathogens, warfare, all these sort of things. And these tribal societies are more involved in that sort of stuff. We live in our societies where, if you're in a city like, especially in a country like Australia, where there's there's limited firearms around, you hardly ever hear of a murder. It's a rare thing. It happens now and then amongst criminals, so there's not much where the average life expectancy is going to look better because, if you have a heart attack, even though you may be guzzling down shitloads of crap, they'll take you in, they'll resuscitate you, and then basically give you a bypass surgery or put a stent in and actually give you blood thinners and keep you going for another probably 10 years artificially. And that changes the life expectancy. It doesn't mean the lifespan or the quality of life is enhanced. No, you're just living longer on meds, or stuff like that. So the reality is these life expectancy stuff is just nonsense, the average stuff. What you really need to look is which societies have centenarians. And when you actually do that, and the blue zones vanish, a lot of the blue zones become less relevant because there are a lot of centenarians in different populations around the world. And if you're really honest the way you did the research in that area, things would look quite different. And a lot of these tribal populations do have centenarians amongst them. Mary basically met some of them. And the guy that actually does the show, what is it called? Truth, Food Lies, that flew over and did the movie that they've actually produced with Mary. She participated with a few others in that movie. They basically looked at these populations and recorded some of these old people. There was an old lady there. She was over 100 and she was jumping up and down. I mean, you'd be struggling to find somebody in a country like ours, like Australia or the US or something like that, at 70 or 60 jumping up and down without basically breaking a hip or fracturing something. These people are over 100 and they're jumping up and down. They're robust. They're strong. So the only thing that kills them is basically a lion or an injury when they're hunting, or basically getting run over by something, or stampeded by a group of animals, or basically being bitten by a snake and dying, these sort of things. And these are things that are environmental hazards that exist in their environment. Somebody who lives in a basically apartment in New York is less likely to actually have any of those threats to their life. So, and with a whole lot of drugs, they could keep on eating kibble and probably remaining a bit longer on this planet than somebody that basically has all these threats around them. So when they do survive, that's what we have to look. These people who actually are living beyond the 100 or in the 90s or whatever, and then look at their robustness. How strong are they? What are their bones and muscles like and all that? When we look at these people in these tribal populations, they're very robust and strong. And they don't look their age. So we know quite clearly that the diet is really doing wonders for them. And they've survived all the calamities in their environment. And so, look, even these sort of centenarians, they're all confounded. there's so much confounding stuff out there, and people make a lot of shit. And this is why we debunk, me, Bart, Mary, and many others debunk. I mean, Mary was a vegetarian before she became, a more carnist. Why? Because she basically saw what people were eating in these places. She went and visited these places thinking that they were eating the perfect diet. And then she was shocked to see they were eating the exact opposite what she was eating. And they were stronger and robust. She couldn't keep up. She's in her mid-40s. She's, she looks pretty good at that age. In the last couple of years, she's fixed up her health problems and all that. But she couldn't keep up even now. She's not 100%. Like I'm not 100%. We've basically damaged our bodies through decades and decades with oxalates and toxic oils and all sorts of things that we've been consuming heavily. But these people are robust and strong. An 80-year-old running up a hillside and she couldn't keep up. That tells you something, that these people are very robust and, but they live in a very hostile environment, and so they're more susceptible. There are lions, cats, all sorts of things that can, tear you to bits. And, once these animals sort of maul you or you get a severe injury, you can get septic shock. There's no antibiotics out there. There's no real sort of modern medicine to stop the bleeding or stop that, and you can die very fast in that sort of environment. But that doesn't mean that, your lifestyle hasn't killed you. It's basically the things in the environment that you're living with that you're at constant risk of. And that's the fundamental difference. So people like ourselves who are all on a more ancestral diet start doing, focusing on getting some of the sun, getting some of those important things, grounding ourselves occasionally, doing those sort of things, because we need those negative ions from the earth to basically clear out a lot of the oxidative stress in our bodies. Because even eating any food, even good food, will still create some oxidation, some reactive oxygen species, much lower than glycolysis, but even lipolysis does produce certain things. This is why we need to be more ancestral as much as possible in doing things a certain way. Also eating certain foods that basically have built-in elements of, taurine as an example, also acts as an antioxidant. So meat has these values. I mean, I know the vegetarians who do all these studies ignore some of these factors. There's plenty of studies showing taurine having this antioxidant effect. But do you ever see it in any study or focused on, meat has a lot of taurine, has this benefit? No, they ignore it. Polyphenols and all other shit that just gives you a hormetic, toxic load, that's supposed to be healthy. What a load of bullshit. But that's the world we live in. Bullshit agenda. Jared's in the sauna. Good to see you, mate. Couldn't sleep, so I might as well tune in. Good to see you, mate. Yes, very much. Yeah, exactly. Plenty. And not only that, when the diseases of civilization turned up to their doorstep, it wasn't the actual Plains Indians that actually suffered. The Plains Indians had very few. It was only the older, more frail members of their society that died from these new diseases. The younger people and all that were far more robust on a species-appropriate diet. And out in the sun having good levels of vitamin D, which is protective against most viruses. It modulates and regulates the immune system and actually has better ways of handling even new diseases. And that's the importance of vitamin D, being out in the sun. The young people out hunting, being out gathering and stuff like that, definitely had this robustness. Where did the people die? The majority of people died in the coastal areas where all those civilizations were, the plant-based ones. That's where the biggest culling happened, from these new diseases. That when the Europeans came back, they found all these empty cities. They thought that some other people had created them, not the locals who had basically been decimated, because they lost all their elites, they lost all their intellectuals and all that, and the civilization just collapsed because there was nobody to, manage the things or know how to manage or have reading and writing in those sort of societies was very limited to a very small number of people. Once you lost those people, you lost all the engineering knowledge and all the rest of the civilization knowledge, and just things just disintegrated back to tribal circumstance. And that's what they found, a much smaller number of people. And these people were still slightly vulnerable. Why? Because they still weren't completely eating a species-appropriate diet, and also weren't completely as robust because they had so many generational damage. And that's what. But they didn't know this. It's just. And they thought, who basically built all this? Let alone some of it had been engulfed by the encroachment of the actual forests. And it was only in the modern era that we were able to work out exactly who had actually created that, because they were actually able to go to the burial sites, take out the bones, look at the collagen, and then compare that with the natives in that area and realize, oh, these are the people of similar genetics. It must be them. So then in the modern era, we've been able to prove it definitively. But we know what happened. People on kibble are more vulnerable to disease, even new diseases. And that's why many of them died. And it's another reason why, unless you get killed in the hunt, especially with buffalo, that pretty hard, they can do a lot of damage, I can tell you. But if you look at the North American Plain Indians, remember, buffalo run quite fast, run faster than, actually the speed of a buffalo is faster than Usain Bolt, who is basically an Olympic sprinter of I think the 100 and 200 meter sort of thing. Anyway, now Usain Bolt basically is slower than one of these animals. North American Plain Indians were seen. Now, these guys, because they had a lot of animal foods, are much taller. They were much taller than the average person. Some of them were close to 7 foot. These were big, robust, fast-moving guys with big legs. And they could actually speed slightly faster. So the ancestors of these North American Plain Indians were much taller. And that's why the colonial, the people that came from Europe, the Europeans actually that saw these people actually running ahead of the buffalo and they used to have like part of the buffalo skin and all that to deceive the buffalo, to get them to follow the leader and to run them off a cliffside, so to basically kill as many as possible. Very good hunting strategy, but very risky as well for the person running ahead. So that person had to run much faster. So these people are absolutely machines, powerful machines, really robust, strong individuals. And one of the presidents of the US is actually a photo of. I need to find it and show you guys. He's well over 6 foot, and these guys towered over him. That's how big. It's probably where the myth of these, giants of North America came from those people. That's where the myth probably emerged out of that history. So, but look at their ancestors now that are on kibble. They're short, they're weak, they're sick. They've really degenerated because of the kibble that the colonists brought and encouraged amongst them. Yes. They eat shitloads of meat in the blue zones. Shitloads. Not just a bit, shitloads. Absolutely shitloads. Even the Greeks. I mean, we've got a thing called, like in Greece, it's a psistadia. A psistadia is a restaurant that actually specialises in meats. I worked in one of them as a youngster when I was 13 and a half. So it was close to one of the parks. So in Agrinio, the northern part, anybody that knows the region, the northern part of Agrinio is where I used to basically, the actual guy was called Sarazzi. That was his Psistadia, and I actually worked in that. And in the evening, whatever meats were left over, we had actually a big platter, and we'd just sit there and gorge on meat, and then would close up the shop, and then would take some with us home. So I can tell you, those were the times. And I used to be lean as. You could see my rib cage. I was that lean. And all I was eating is basically dairy, a lot of the yogurts and stuff like that, the lamb's yogurts and all that, and shitloads of meat. And then I came back to Australia, and somehow I was tricked and deceived in believing, I did it all wrong. I need to get back on the kibble. It was, the 80s, mid-80s onwards, when the low-fat craze hit. And I jumped on that bandwagon and listened to the experts. And it was kibble and basically seed oils. Yes, seed oils were the new wonder thing, as I was told. And I jumped on that bandwagon. So did my mother. And she never lived as long as her other siblings. I wonder why. She died at 76. And her brother died at 93. And he was basically a person that drank a lot and still made it to 93 and smoked in the past, actually more than me. And my other auntie, she's still here. She's still alive and much older than what my mother, she's getting into her 80s now and still gets around. I mean, she doesn't have a perfect diet, but she doesn't eat crap. She doesn't eat seed oil. She uses olive oil. My father, still around, 87 in January. He used to basically think we were idiots, eating a lot of kibble and basically things like, I used to have fish sticks because fish is much more, and it was in batter or, in crumbed shit like that, much healthier than red meat. But my father thought I was a bit of a dick. He was right about that, because I ended up on the slab, having my chest ripped open and a heart taken out and mended. So, what do you think humans need in terms of calcium, as RDO recommends? How do you think that someone like Bart gets calcium? He's predominantly eating muscle meats. Thank you. Well, what they've actually seen in studies, that when you increase the amount of meat in the diet, you increase calcium absorption. And the thinking behind that is probably leucine is playing a role there. And taurine is also playing a role. Because remember, taurine regulates all the actual minerals. The osmotics of the fluids of your blood and cells, the intra and extracellular fluids, are regulated by actual taurine. That's what reduces your blood pressure. That's why I usually say to people, when you consume taurine-rich foods like animal foods or take as a supplement, your blood pressure will come down. You need to monitor your blood pressure meds to adjust them. Okay? So it's really important for calcium. Also, choline, which is rich in food, also has a regulatory effect on calcium, improves calcium absorption. So you've got a number of animal components that have a really strong, affinity to pulling in, and also the other thing that's been noticed is when people have more animal foods, that means more amino acids, it also increases the uptake of calcium. So when you have less studies, I haven't done this. I've done the leucine one. I'm going to do the other ones eventually. Will show much lower levels. So, you can do quite well, bones and other things like that. And the body regulates all that sort of stuff, works out, I need more, we'll pull in more in that regard. So, and those sort of foods help a lot. Obviously, if you're consuming dairy like I do, actually Bart does consume cheese. He does consume cheese. He doesn't consume milk, but he does consume some cheese. So still gets a bit from there as well. And I also, I have a lot of dairy, both milk and all that. So I have no problems in that regard. My body is probably excreting some of the excess calcium because it's saying, oh, it's enough, getting rid of it. It's a different if you take a supplement. A supplement actually bypasses all the systems that actually, because remember you've got those protein metalloproteins, and they literally take in minerals, and they are regulated. But when you actually take a supplement, it bypasses a lot of that sort of stuff and gets into the bloodstream, and that's a different thing altogether. So that's an unregulated, system. So that's why I don't recommend those supplements at all. And I recommend people basically species appropriate diet, and they'll take in, and the body will regulate that sort of stuff. It also basically, if you have lower intake of calcium, your body, as long as your kidneys are being regulated properly, that means you don't have high insulin, you're on a species appropriate diet, the actual recycling of sodium, calcium, and magnesium as well, uric acid, a lot of these things is better regulated when the kidney function is proper on a species appropriate diet. It's usually when you're not, and you've got shrinkage of the kidneys. What increases the size of the kidneys? Remember the rat study, 70% protein, big messy fucking kidneys. It's meat. Your tissue, your bones, everything is made of, bones are mineralized protein. Your muscles and everything else, tissue is majority protein. So what do you need? Amino acids. So if you're getting enough of that sort of stuff, the body is much more robust, much in a better situation, much able to actually transcript shitloads of enzymes, because you need enzymes. And those enzymes need cofactors, and then they run and do a whole lot of biological processes. So if you're not giving yourself enough protein, that is when people start falling apart. Their tissue falls apart, and it's not accidental. Now, I know there's a biohack, as I said, with leucine supplementation, which obviously, as you break down tissue, if you've got enough leucine in the system, you can drive that tissue that's actually like autophagy or whatever, that comes into the bloodstream, that additional, you can take those aminos and force them back into muscle protein synthesis because of leucine. Naturally, that wouldn't happen. That's a biohack if you're basically low protein or in a fasted way, and you want to actually build muscle even in a fasted way. So that's a bit of a biohack. Normally, you would have to eat the food to get enough. That's just to show that, quite clearly, that study that I wanted to show, that low protein, high protein, and then the amount with low protein and leucine in it made all the difference. That the leucine is the one that's driving it, not the amount of protein. Obviously, more protein, you can actually do more things. Your body can actually build and transcript more enzymes to do more wonderful things in the body, which is important as well. Yes, it does. It does very much. And it's very bioavailable as well in that regard. And also the body recycles. Yes, it's such, it works out what it has and what it needs and stuff like that. It's very, very good. As I say to people, if you've got higher parathyroid, I'm saying, well, what's your vitamin D level? Because if you've got low vitamin D status, yes, it doesn't matter what fucking diet you're on, you're going to be wasting away. You need vitamin D. Vitamin D is very important. So that also brings in more calcium. Yes, and magnesium. So I suspect you need more. See, that's why I say sun, salt, and meat. I don't say it accidentally, because they work synergistically. That's how they worked for our ancestors. Works for us as well. Not a problem. Ah, yes, faulty towers. Him beating up the car with a stick. I remember that. I've actually got all the episodes. A mate of mine, actually, for my mother, made a series video type thing, a DVD for her. It was a 2 part 1 and part 2. It had all the episodes of Faulty Towers, plus the introduction was always the Zorba the Greek type music. It was fucking hilarious. Yes, very nice. one of my work colleagues and mates at work, Rodney, that was really nice of him to do that for Mum. Yeah, she used to get a bit of a kick out of that as well. She loved faulty towers. How would I know if I have more genetics? Assuming I would be able to digest. I'll tell you one thing. Most people that are lactose intolerant, they shit their pants if they basically and really get a lot of stomach upset, and also tend to burp quite a bit and tend to fart like mad. So if you've got a lactose issue very fast. Now, there can be variations. You can be not homozygous, but you may be like heterozygous. So you may have one of the alleles, but not both. And depends on the genetics. So obviously you would have the genetics within the Eurasian region, and then on top of that would be the food. So, it would be the type of milk or dairy product. Is it raw? So if it's raw, it would have the lactase enzymes. If it's not, if it's been homogenized, it won't. So if you've got one, let's say, of the alleles, but not both, and so you've got some lactose persistency or some lactose capacity, you may need the assistance. Like with raw milk, you may do better. You may not feel anything. Where with pasteurized milk, you may not have enough, be able to produce enough, especially if you've only got one of the alleles. That means in one of the genes, and in the other gene you have nothing. Then you've got very limited, because there's two genes in specifically Europeans. So you need to have, one of each, or one of them having both. And so if you don't have enough, then you can have a problem there. So you really need to have raw milk under those circumstances. But if you've basically got the genetics, it's a video that I haven't made, but I will make, for lactose persistency. There are a lot of different variations, because there is the Middle Eastern one. There's the one that the Maasai have, which is similar. So there's a lot of differences. The Middle Eastern one is more suitable to A2 type casein. They do much better. And it's sort of, any A2 type milks, particularly, it seems to be more adapted to the camel milk, obviously. Those people consumed a lot of it for large parts of their history, so it's understandable. But it can vary quite a bit of how many alleles and you've got of the two genes. So how much you can do without, you can do fine. I mean, I'm fine with even pasteurized, but some people are, they really need raw. Pasteurized, it just doesn't cut it. They just don't have enough lactose persistency into old age, and they've got all limited capacity there, one of the genes only. So that's where he's enjoying himself far too much. Relaxing in the sauna sounds perfect. I should drag a sauna in here. What do they say? Like in a pond like a lizard or something. There's another saying. I fucked that up completely. Can the beast person still go into rabbit starvation if they are eating lean protein only? Thank you. Yep. Potentially. It depends on their insulin resistant state. So it's a complicated. Usually most people, if they basically go to meats and get themselves, like they initially get themselves into, let me put it this way, yes and no, depends. So let's say you keep it completely clean and you keep the insulin to glucagon down to 1.3, very low. So you do initial fasting. So it brings your insulin resistance under control. You come right down and things normalize. Then you can consume slightly leaner meats. You're always going to have a bit of fat on them. And, you don't want to go too lean. You still need a bit coming in, but not a lot. But a lot of the body fat you're going to be using up and you'll just lean out. So a bit like that rat that 70%, protein, and it just leaned out completely. So very little fat, zero carbs. It was just a lot of, in particular, lean, and it leaned out completely, equivalent to a 30-year life of a person. Obviously, they've got a bit more robustness compared to us in terms of rabbit starvation sort of stuff. But you'll know quite clearly when you lean out. See, rabbit starvation really happens to people like Inuit, people like that, but they're lean already. They don't have much fat stores. So they are very down to very small amounts of fat stores that they replenish now and then. But somebody who's got shitloads of fat on them, nah, definitely not. The only issue there may be the fat soluble vitamin issue. But then if they've got a lot of fat stores, and they consumed meat and not plants in the past, they probably have some level of fat soluble vitamins stored in their tissue, and they'll be releasing all that into the bloodstream, so they won't need any as much. So it really varies, but generally speaking, nah, not really, unless you are severely deranged and insulin resistant, then you will know, because basically your blood sugar will be spiking and you won't be able to access fat because you've got too high insulin. So that's when you'll actually end up in rabbit starvation. So it depends on how deranged you are, in a sense. So a lot of people, obese people, are deranged, and even after fasting still can remain deranged for some time. So that's why I can't give you a perfect, answer. It varies so much. It really depends where your endocrine system is. What's your hormonal state? Then I can tell you whether you will go into rabbit starvation or not. But if you're insulin sensitive and you're eating fairly lean meats and you've got shitloads of fat on you and you're losing all that fat, nah, because you're going to get a lot from the meat. You're going to get a lot of the water-soluble vitamins. You get the fat-soluble vitamins from your adipose tissue, but it's going to be released in your bloodstream. You'll get enough minerals from the meat, so should be fine, more or less, in that regard. You may have to have a bit of organ meats, a bit here or there, just to cover some of the actual. If that's and that will basically, I suspect you're asking that question because you want to lean out very fast in that regard, and that will lean you out quite fast. It's the way like bodybuilders do. They cut carbs to zero, they cut fat back to much lower levels, and then they just lean out very fast, like those rats did. So it's a high protein type approach, protein diet, and it just leans you out very rapidly in that regard. But once you get to low fat stores, obviously rabbit starvation then can definitely kick in, even if you're insulin sensitive. Okay, I've lost my spot. It's starting to rain outside. Fuck. I actually wanted to go for a walk. Oh well. Ling, if you're listening to this, we're going to have to wait a bit longer. Fuck. Yeah, get your sleep. That's okay. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your support, like everyone. Yeah, sleep is really important. I don't want people neglecting their sleep. You can always watch this tomorrow, some other time. Don't neglect your sleep. I mean, Lukey used to stay for really late when in the early days, and I said to him, "Look, mate, you don't have to stay. Get your sleep." And now he actually goes early to sleep, and then he wakes up early, and then he comes on sometimes on the Eurasian live stream towards the end of it because he's around. So I usually send him both links in that regard. And he's become a sort of a co-host in a sense. So you could say I'm sort of mentoring in a sense and encouraging him to start his channel, which is going to be, he said eventually he will get into it and all that. So at this stage, it's a work in progress for him. My grandmother, Dee, was not only a medical nurse, but also a butcher, cooked things. And she also worked bread dough and butchering in animals at the point that she could punch the hell out of you. Look, a lot of my auntie was very much, she was pastoralist, very robust woman, very strong woman. I mean, she could go up the mountains, she can do all sorts of things. Very strong people. My grandfather used to walk in the dark down a hillside. I mean, most young people can't bloody do that nowadays. That's how degenerated we have become. It's shocking to say the least. It's absolutely shocking. Look, I've got longevity genes. They mean shit. If you're eating kibble and seed oils, you'll end up with a heart condition like I did. So you still need to eat the right stuff to basically get there. So I'm going to basically pull the pin because I want to go away and do my laundry. So I need to get that done. So I've got an hour. I can get 2 spins in, so I can do a wash and then a dry. So I can get that done, and hopefully in an hour's time, I could basically go for a fucking walk. Hopefully the rain stops because it's fucking pelting out there at the moment. So yeah, that's the aim at this stage. But I mean, I look at people. I was lucky to have the experience. Do rabbits get human starvation? I suspect they do. All mammals can, depending on their access to nutrients, can end up in a starvation state. I mean, you see even rats. They grow massively in numbers and they collapse, and a lot of them starve to death because of not enough food around. So the same thing can happen to rabbits as well. Some of the actual enzymatic sort of processes in these different animals may vary slightly, but not a lot. When it comes to fundamental, the mechanics, when we're looking at mammals, the fundamental mechanics are not very different. Where the differences lie is what animals are adapted in terms of food. That's where you look at the mechanics and they're very similar, and then you look at the machinery to extract the nutrients. And some animals have got multiple chambers, cecums, and all these other different variations in their digestive system to extract from different sources in a more efficient way. They're more adapted to those things. Other animals don't, have different methods. But fundamentally, they're all trying to, even the cow is basically a carnivore. Because what does it do? It's got 3 chambers to ferment a whole lot of plants. And then it produces a massive amount of these little organisms, bacteria, protozoa, all these different microorganisms. And then it spits out all the fiber in its waste out of its rear end. And it sucks into the last 4th chamber, which is an acidic chamber, all those protozoa. So it's actually consuming animals in the end. Microorganisms, but they're still animals. They're still, they're not plants. And it's and the final chamber is an acidic chamber that basically will turn all that into proteins and fats for the cow. So at the end of the day, you still need protein. The cow's basically in a state of ketosis, low carbohydrate state. So the reality is most of the ruminant animals basically have these sort of structures and extracting. If you look at nature, what's in nature? There's not much. There's not much sugar. It's seasonal. You don't have bananas all year round or anything like that, unless you've got a refrigeration where you can store the stuff and provide it all year round. But generally speaking, everything refrigeration was basically green type plants, which you fermented in a cecum or in other chambers. And then from that, you grew a whole lot of big bacterial load. And the chimps do the same thing. They have this massive cecum. And so even though they eat massive amounts of meat, they still have the capacity to use starvation foods, which is plants. And that's their fallback, but they've got a cecum to extract. When it comes to the gorillas, they tend to be more plants and termites. It's a mix of plants and termites. So they get some fat, some basically protein from the termites. They primarily focus on the termites as well. You should see them. They rip these trees apart and just try to get to the termites. That's their main source of protein and all that. Most animals try to get different organisms or stuff like that, or whether it's insects or stuff like that. Insects are one of the most biggest in terms of numbers, in terms of weight, organic matter on the planet. There's shitloads of insects. And a lot of these animals consume a lot of them. And a lot of the actual plant foods and all that, they provide short-chain fatty acids on the one hand, some energy in terms of saturated fats, and some of the protein that is extracted from the bacteria that breaks down this cellulose and extracts some protein out of that. It's a poor quality protein, but it supplements additionally with the actual termites and all that. That's pretty much most animals around are in a low carbohydrate state. This is why zoo animals don't live very long, especially primates. They die very young. Why? Because they're on glucose diets, kibble, bananas, all this sort of shit. Just idiots. Don't know what they're feeding these animals and they're killing them early. But in the wild, they live quite robust because they're on hunting expeditions. Chimps out there hunting. And even basically, I know that termites are one of the favorite foods of the gorilla. But even the gorilla occasionally will kill small animals and eat them. So, this sort of bullshit about that they are plant eaters and all that is just absolute nonsense. It's just not enough nutrients and calories. Even an animal that's got such a big fermenting chamber can't extract sufficient from plants. Plants are nutrient poor, period. When we see vegans try to do a pure plant-based diet, they basically waste away within a couple of years. You would never get multiple generations. Humanity would have died out, and most species would have died out. So most animals out there are omnivores or carnivores, one of the two. Even the so-called plant eater ruminants are really carnivores in the end, because the final chamber, what they eat is a carnivorous meal in the end. So it's just nonsense, absolute fucking nonsense that we've been peddled for many years. Yes. Anyway, thanks guys. I'm out of here. Thanks for being here. See you guys in about 5 hours from now, those people who are going to be on the Eurasian live stream. Anybody else who's from North America and will still be asleep by that time, thanks for being here, and I will see all you lovely people next week. And apparently Bart's got a lot of entertaining videos this week, so we'll get a few laughs out of the cockwomble idiots out there that keep on telling us that we should be eating kibble. So we'll get a few laughs out of those cockwombles, and I'll try and see if I can get one or two things out this week as well on some of these controversial subjects. And if you hear any nonsense on, people making up shit or saying stuff, email me. If you go to the About button, email me like Chris did about the prions. Just email me and I'll make a video about it, and you guys will be able to get a laugh about these charlatans and their absolute nonsense that they peddle, because we need to expose them. I've got no problems. Like even that guy, I agree completely about the lockdown stuff and all that. I've got no issues. But we don't need to make up shit. We lose credibility by making up shit or manufacturing shit or misdirecting or making out threats that don't exist. Let's be just honest about these sort of things and just point out that these people are misusing and abusing their power and doing that. We don't have to be conspiratorial, make up shit and stuff like that that's baseless. We need to basically point out that these people are not doing the right thing and they need to be exposed for the way they manage things and the way they are basically being intrusive into our liberties and the way we want to live our lives. If I want to fucking take a risk, it's my body. Fuck off is my attitude towards the government. Don't tell me what I can actually eat, drink, or put into my body. That's my business. And as you guys know, I've got if you look at my little booklet, I'll actually bring it out one of these days and I'll actually show you. I may do it in tonight's live stream and show my booklet of vaccines. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, never have been. But unless a vaccine has gone through 5 to 6 years and it's been properly tested and assessed, there are always risks. As I said, when I said about the new Indian vaccine and the Novavax, on paper, they look pretty clean. More like the traditional, look pretty clean. I can't really find anything to fault them at the moment, in that regard. Maybe there is something that I've missed, potentially. And that's why I say, unless you really, really have to, stick to vitamin D. But if you have to, make sure your vitamin D level's fine, so it regulates the immune system properly. And then even if you take one of these, it shouldn't be really a problem. But they have to be the stuff that's localized. If you don't feel pain, localized, quite a bit pain, that's the whole purpose. It should be a localized effect, not a systemic effect throughout the body. That's what all these other ones that are encapsulated in nanoparticles and actually go into cells, because they circumvent the immune system and then create all this viral spike load. There's a lot of issues with those. We've discussed them before. I'm not going to go over them now. We need to stop these people being focused on profits before they represent us. Okay, we vote those arseholes in to represent us and not to put our health at risk, and to basically provide us with good sound information, because there's plenty of research out there about ivermectin, vitamin D and stuff like that. And why aren't they telling people this sort of stuff and putting lives at risk and just threatening them with coercive powers? That's unacceptable. On this level, I agree with those guys. I've got no problems because I've got the same sentiments. But, it doesn't help the cause if you're basically peddling garbage, because then people can go, oh, I was able to I just saw that. When I saw that, when he said that, I looked at the video and he actually said about prions. I go, oh, fuck. How can you be such an absolute ignoramus? Because even I knew it was a beta helix. I just needed to go to find the actual thing to show it. So I found the one at the Mayo Clinic, which was the easiest one. I didn't have to go and search for a study to show it. That was the easiest, because it was just basically that's what one looks like, that's what the other one looks like. Simple as that. But it just aggravates you, because these people are not our friends. These people are fucking charlatans. I don't know whether they're shilling for the actual big pharma. They may be deliberately as misdirects to basically make us look like, charlatans or pseudo idiots or whatever. I mean, maybe that's what his goal is. Maybe that's what his goal is, to undermine in the eyes of people, where they will look at him and go, oh, he's an idiot, he's got no idea. And that's probably what happens. These people are always being peddled out to basically undermine good movements. It always happens. You take a look at a lot of the popular movements, they're always misdirected and pushed in other directions deliberately, and clouding the water, muddy the water as much as possible, so people don't get the real message out. They get all these shit things. But if you're listening to, if you've got rallies and all that, just tell them it's bullshit. They don't have to worry about Novavax, the other one from India. They don't need to worry about that. But the best thing they can do for themselves is vitamin D at this stage, until we know more. And unless they are really in difficult dire straits where they could potentially lose their employment or stuff like that, then they may have to bite the bullet and say, well, I'm going to take the Novavax. I'm going to maintain a good level of vitamin D. So, to regulate everything fine. And just in case I get pricked and I get a bit of an immune response within the blood vessels, I'll take a low dose vitamin. I always look, when they actually prick my, when I do a vaccine, I always check to see, did I get a lot of bleeding? Because that will sort of indicate that, or was I injected in the muscle, or did they hit a blood vessel or whatever? So I'm always a bit careful. I notice those sort of things. I sort of concentrate on those things. And if it basically seems to there was more blood there or whatever, I go, look, for a week, I'll take a low dose aspirin, even though a low dose aspirin is not a good thing for a person like me who has basically glucose 6-phosphate deficiency. It actually is not good. But I'll do it just for to deal with that period, and I'll leave it at that. But there's, as I say, there's risks with everything. Crossing the street, there's risks. At the end of the day, you can't live in fear. But if you need to get, maintain employment or whatever, I need to basically provide people with options. And the only option that I can currently put my hand on my heart and with confidence say that it's less likely to cause you any problems, even though we haven't the 5 or 6 years of research on this thing. On paper, it's less likely to cause you any problems. For those people that have to. For those people who don't, or not being forced or whatever, coerced or whatever, vitamin D, the sun. Oh, it's nothing more beautiful than the sun. Enjoy it. Anyway, and with a nice steak. I will see you guys, some of you guys later, and some of you guys next week. Anyway, see yous.